5, 4, 3, 2, 1. We have ignition. Strap in.
And now, for the next 24 hours, live from a lockdown room in Leeswood, comes the Andy Snowden Radio Show in aid of the NHS Charities Together appeal. Please welcome the man voted best suited to wear a mask. It's Andy Snowden!
Hello.
Emma, how are you?
I'm all right, thank you. How are you?
I'm very well. Well, I'm all right. How are you? It's weird because you go from saying how are you as a kind of a welcoming, and then suddenly it means something.
I know, strange times. Everything's changing its meaning. No, I'm fine. Yeah, I've just been sort of quite poorly since I think March the 18th was when I first noticed it. But I'm fine now.
I've been wanting to get you onto my show actually for ages.
Oh, really?
Up at Theatre Clue, we're doing your
Wave Me Goodbye.
Wave Me Goodbye, yeah. And I thought, oh great, we'll get Emma on, and then I never saw you again after I saw you that time at Theatre Clue.
It's funny, I'm still in touch with a lot of people from youth theatre.
Yeah.
When I was ill at home, one of them, my friend John, came round and got my medicine from the pharmacy and was like, and we were like talking sort of through the closed door to each other, and I was thinking, God, if we'd seen her 30 years ago, we'd be like, yeah. What sort of crazy dystopia is this?
I know, but I mean, a lot of the people who were in the Clue Youth Theatre, they went on to become, they went into the profession and they became professional actors and whatnot. Yeah, a lot became really, really big. And you included, but as a writer, which is how do you fall into becoming a writer for? I mean, you're obviously well known for the children's TV. Do you write for adult TV as well, or is it?
I've done a bit of adult TV. I've done a few like Doctor Who spin-off audios, and some of those are for things like Torchwood, which are a bit more adult. I basically with the children's TV, I started on the story of Tracy Beaker quite a few years ago, and from that I was offered other work by people in the department. So it's sort of it's quite often you do one thing and then you sort of get known for it and you get offered other similar things, don't you? So
yeah.
It's like that really. But yeah, I started off as an actor, and I think the first thing I did was I did an adaptation of Little Women, which is a children's, sort of young people's coming of age book. So we did that, and I was also sending stuff to the BBC and doing script reading. So I think it kind of came out of acting, and I think, and the sort of wanting to tell stories and be involved in things in that way. So.
When we were kids, it was all the sort of Enid Blyton things that were being adapted for kids' television. But Jacqueline Wilson seems to be the modern day version, and you're sort of top of the pops with all her adaptations, right?
I've done a lot of Jacqueline Wilson work. Yeah, I mean, I think she. It's funny because the story of Tracy Beaker has been such a huge thing for CBBC. It's had so many sequels and spin-offs, and it's become it sort of created the show The Dumping Ground, which is one of it's kind of their Grange Hill. It's the sort of cornerstone of their programming now. But like a lot of things, it wasn't a no-brainer that would go ahead, because in 2002, when they first did the story of Tracy Beaker, I think her work was considered quite dark, and it's and I think it's still considered. I think although a lot of countries have their own sort of more slightly gritty domestic shows, there's still this expectation that to sell internationally, you've got to be very sort of slightly bland, really. You can't it's sort of and so like the Jacqueline Wilson shows are sort of seen very much as being sort of for British kids. But the story of Tracy Beaker, it's interesting because there's nothing dark in it. But I think what's Jacqueline Wilson's so good about what's not said, and it's sort of like it's quite clear that in the story of Tracy Beaker that like her mum was very neglectful and sort of brought in a series of men who were abusive, but it's kind of, but Tracy still adores her mum, and it's kind of like all the really bad stuff kind of happens off screen, and you can kind of intuit what it is, and that's quite the Jacqueline Wilson sort of her way of storytelling.
Yeah, you did a lovely piece at Theatre Clue last year called Wave Me Goodbye, And there was elements of that. It was all about the evacuees, wasn't it? And there was elements of that. It was quite emotional, really, to watch.
It's a very emotional story, and I think short Wales's own youth theatre's own Sean Jones was in that, and Kerry Pearce, who had been in the youth theatre before my time, there was a great cast, and it's but I think it's it obviously sort of diving into the emotions of sort of 10-year-old children who are being sent away from their parents and don't know if they'll ever see them again. It's it's incredibly emotional territory, and I think also with that because we slightly relocated from the book, where in the book the kids are from London. We changed it so they were from Liverpool, so it felt as if we were telling a story about what happened here all those years ago. And it's sort of, I think every sort of region has got sort of their story and their memories, and I think obviously there's still people around who remember the evacuees coming here and remember being an evacuee. So I think it's sort of remembering what the country before most of us were born, but what sort of the land here went through sort of quite recently is quite emotional. And it's quite emotional times at the moment with what we're going through.
I was going to say that the similarities are quite strange. I mean, if someone was to say to you, send your children away, you'd say, I don't think so. But
I know.
During the Second World War, I mean, the memory, the way it's told, mostly in like the Lion and the Witch in the Wardrobe and things like that, it always looks quite romantic. And Uncle Tom, what's it called, Mr. Tom.
Good night, Mr. Tom.
Good night, Mr. Tom. Yeah, and that those stories, they go, I wouldn't have minded being evacuated. And then my dad lived in Liverpool during the Second World War, and I said, was he evacuated? And he went, no, my mum wouldn't let me. And I thought, oh right, so there was an option.
I think a lot of parents said no, and a lot of kids ran away, and I think there was a big sort of there was kind of a time when a lot of people gave up on it, and then there was a kind of second wave of evacuation because obviously when they got on it so early. Yeah. I guess there are parallels. If you get on something really early, which during the period of phony war, so they sent their children away with all that agony, and then nothing happened in Britain for a year. So obviously a lot of people crept back then, and then when the bombs started falling, they went again. Yeah. I think it's interesting because people did all that, but it sort of seems strange to us now the amount of people who complied. But then when you think about it, what's going on now? I think when people were first sort of saying, like, can you imagine, we'll ask everyone to stay home and they'll do it. I think that seemed unimaginable as well, and yet we've kind of by and large got on board with it. So I suppose I think I was sort of I think in some ways I think the government are quite sort of surprised to see how obedient people have been. So,
but I was going to ask actually, because you're saying about steering clear of dark things for CBBC, but when you'd think it would be quite a good platform to be able to write not necessarily dark stories, but things like let's say, for argument's sake, abuse or things like that. Do they steer clear of that, or do they just think it needs to be entertaining? And
always, I mean, it's funny. The rules are always changing, and I think as writers, quite often with our producers help, we often kind of push the envelope about what you can do. Then the rules change all the time. I think because in my day they were showing things like brain chill when they were showing heroin addiction and death and things. I think what then happened was they put CBBC on its own channel, and it's for 6 to 12-year-olds. So that's an enormous range. Yeah. And it sort of began to be, we can't possibly show anything that might upset a sensitive 6-year-old. So that effectively put a kind of ceiling on what you could do. But now things are being more watched using platforms like iPlayer rather than the linear channel. I think it's changing again. So I think so we're always sort of trying to push the boundaries of what we can show in a way that's that's responsible and sort of will be sort of interesting but not utterly traumatizing for kids. And I think that I think they're starting making some shows. They started making some shows that slightly older viewers now. But it has been the fact of it being its own channel was quite an issue for a while, because it sort of meant that everything had to be quite made quite safe in case a very sensitive 6-year-old might watch it.
Yeah, that's fair enough. I didn't even cross my mind that. But your Demon Headmaster was
You get away with quite a lot in that. I think it's because it's got that it's got a slightly sort of sci-fi twist. Because luckily it's not, as far as we know, it's not real. You don't really get demonic headmasters with hypnotic powers.
Yeah. But I know a lot of adults that went, wow, he's a bit near the knuckle, isn't it? But, and it's funny because I was in drama school with Nick Reeves.
Oh, wait, of course you were, yeah.
So I checked it out. I saw that he was in it before I knew that you'd written it, which was funny. And so I started watching it, but it was a bit like Doctor Who when we were kids. And I remember a teacher saying, "Aren't you scared?" And I thought, scared? I'm not scared of Doctor Who. But now you look at it now as an adult, and you kind of say, "Oh, I see what you mean. It can be quite dark." But anyway, you as you were saying earlier, you've had this coronavirus, which must have been really scary for you. How did it start? What were the symptoms to start with?
Well, it's been interesting because it was about March. As I was saying, I was working it out because I had plenty of time in the hospital to try and think. March the 18th is when because what I'd planned to do was I was going to self-isolate and to make sure I was okay and then come to stay with my parents. But then I got sick, and it started, I think, fairly classically. There was a bit of a cough, and I had sort of these feverish chills, and was tired and short of breath. So and all the advice was, just sort of, self-isolate, drink plenty of fluids and you'll be fine. So I kind of did that, and then I sort of thought, I was getting better. But then I started getting a wave of something different, which was being constantly sick. So I was just sort of being sick all the time. And then I managed to get through to 111, and they gave me some anti-sickness medicine. And then I started getting these the thing which drove me in the end to A&E was these really bad abdominal pains that just went on for 4 days and just didn't stop, and no painkillers or make a dent in it. And I was just like, what is this? And so and all the doctors I spoke to were saying, oh, it's not coronavirus, it's something else. It's probably to do with gallbladder, or it could be a stomach ulcer, but you need to go to A&E to get yourself x-rayed, to get yourself checked out, find out what's going on there. So in the end I went to A&E. And they could see I was really ill by this point, and they put me in a ward and they did scans. And then suddenly about 2 a.m, they came to my room going we've got to move you. It's we can't find anything wrong with your stomach, but we can see the patterns in the lungs which show that you've been infected by the COVID-19. So, and they moved me in the middle of the night down to the COVID ward, which was brilliant because I got my own room. It was like isolation, so it was very nice. But yeah, it was just funny because the symptoms weren't classic. Everyone thought it, all these doctors had thought it wasn't COVID, and then suddenly they looked at this X-ray, and apparently you can see this distinctive pattern on the lungs, and they said it was COVID. So then I was just in hospital for another 8 days, and they're giving me loads of antibiotics and I guess antivirals and stuff to sort of try, and it was just suddenly it was all about the COVID, because it apparently can just get in all your organs, it can get in your stomach, it can get in your liver. And there's another thing that I've sort of read about since, was that they were saying that the oxygen in my blood was low, but I'd never been struggling for breath, and apparently that's another thing it does. So it's sort of, your lungs are under attack, but you don't know. So I mean, so it's sorry, this is all very scary because it's going we just don't know what this thing does, and your symptoms can be really random. But all I would say is just if you are feeling really ill, I was worried about going to A&E because I thought they'll be overwhelmed, but they were coping really well. They looked after me really well. And I know that, so, if you're feeling really poorly with just, so poorly that you'd have gone to A&E anyway, you must do it,
But I mean, I was saying to you yesterday, wasn't I, that, actually before, when you were just, let's just say, normally ill, and a mutual friend of ours texted me and she said, did you know Emma's really ill? So everybody, it goes around like wildfire. Yeah. Everyone's having a little bit of a panic, and then they went, but then it was almost like, oh, she's all right now, and then it was like, oh, great, and then she texted me again and said, no, she's actually got the coronavirus. Now, it's a little bit like, I think, for friends and family and whatnot, it must be like when somebody says, somebody's got cancer or something, you just think, oh, what? That's horrendous. But for you to be sat in bed at 2 o'clock in the morning, for someone to go up and tell you that you've got that, did you go cold, or did you just sort of take it as read?
I think that I'd just been feeling so bad, and I kind of just wanted an explanation. I kind of thought, I know that a lot of people have, and that I suppose because I didn't feel. I was in a lot of pain, but I didn't feel sort of in myself like I'm going to die, because thankfully, I didn't have the being short of breath thing. And I think I'd, having had not much to do while I was alive except read about the coronavirus, I kind of thought, it's funny, it wasn't like cancer in it sort of, I kind of thought like, oh my God, this is, I'm really scared for my life. I think I kind of thought, oh, it's that. Because of course, we know that a lot of people, the vast majority of people who get the coronavirus will be okay. So I think it wasn't sort of, it wasn't a sort, it wasn't a sort of panic in that sense, but it was just a sort of like, wow, at a time when everyone's looking out for it, so many doctors have told me I didn't have it. Yep. It just sort of shows how tricksy this thing is, and how, and the many forms it can take. What's the treatment for it, or you just have to sort of ride it out and drink lots of water? Well, I think what happened was that apparently like they could just tell all my white blood cells were up, so I was like fighting off all these infections. So I think they were giving me antibiotics. So I think they blamed the COVID to start with, but I think like other infections had come in. So I think they were just sort of giving me antivirals and antibiotics to just basically everything, like quite sort of wide spectrum, just to sort of fight off all the infections. So it was quite strange, because obviously every time a doctor came in, I had loads of questions, and they were just sort of giving me, going like, we just got to observe you and sort of see when your blood gets back to normal, and just give you like stuff to get to just try and fight off all these infections. So I'm still under antibiotics. So it's all a bit strange, really. But that's what they eventually decided it was, and that's what they've written on the hospital discharge forms and things. So
when they do discharge you, and you're starting to feel a little bit better, you live on your own, right?
Yes.
So that would concern me if I was living on my own. There's an added concern there, isn't there not?
Yes, I think they probably probably would have not sent me home till I was okay. I mean, and I've got people who can sort of bring me things and leave them on my doorstep, and I've got I've got lots of people who are kind of checking in with me. So yeah, I'm okay, but
right.
Yeah, it must be hard from the sort of time when you're sort of well enough. But that's the thing. It's sort of you want to get out of the hospital, but it's quite nice having people sort of bringing you things and doing everything for you.
Yeah. Yes. Well, I was only saying yesterday, this is actually something that I used to think would be quite nice. Not being ill, but everyone being locked down. You're not allowed to go out. You're told you're not allowed to go out. Marvellous. But now we're here. It's like, wow. Not enough now. So have you managed to do any work? Have you been able to utilise the time that way?
Not much. I've done a little bit. I've been doing sort of talking to the script editor of the Demon Headmaster, and just talking through storylines and stuff, because they're still hoping to start filming a second series at the end of the summer. I mean, obviously fingers crossed that we'll be in a situation where that can happen by then.
But it's so many things, especially in the show business world, that it all just stopped dead, didn't it? It was like nothing. That's it. You can't. I mean, my brother Phil was about to start a brand new show in the West End, and that's it, done. And he was about to film in I think it was Finland, something like that. Yeah, but he just went, oh, that's cancelled. It's
been an absolute massive shock to our industry, because we're all freelancers. I was very lucky that I actually had ongoing. So I had work that I just couldn't do because I was ill. But so many people, I just don't think it's just not a situation that people have really considered, because a lot of sort of successful actors and writers or whatever, if this show closes, I'll get a job in another show. If this, or maybe I'll get a TV job. And I don't think anybody ever really considered the scenario that all TV and theatre would just stop overnight.
I know.
That's something that ever really, occurred to any of us.
No, I know. It was absolutely bizarre. And you sound quite popular. You're getting pinged left, right and centre there.
Oh, sorry about that.
So, Do you get back up to Wrexham much?
Well, not well. As I said, I'd hope to. I'd hope to go. That was the plan before the before the whole lockdown started. I'd been planning to go, and I was last there Christmas now, I think. But
Right.
yes, I was planning to get there for this whole thing. But then, first of all, being ill, then being in hospital got in the way.
Yeah, but it's a massive worry for your mum and dad.
Oh yeah, but they're fine. They're obviously it's awful, but if you're actually sort of getting this thing, most people will get through it and be fine. It's just the a very few very very unlucky ones who get really ill. And I was never, I think, but it was probably lucky that I did get to the hospital, having now read what sort of happens, that it kind of it hides in your lungs, damaging them, and you don't know, and it does that for ages before you get sick. I think, oh God, it was lucky I got into hospital then before that can happen. But I think it's when it really attacks your lungs and sort of makes it hard to breathe. That's how it makes people really bad or kills them. And I was just lucky enough to not have that. So.
Well, I'm so glad that you seem to be back to almost 100%. Are you?
Yes, I'm fine now. I'm fine now. God. Well, I mean, it had been hanging around for so long, more than a month of the coughs. So it's good to get rid of it.
Oh, thank God for that. Well, it's been lovely to speak to you. You must come back. You must come into the studio when you come back up to Wrexham, and we'll do this face to face.
Definitely, I'd love to.
Yeah.
I'd love to.
Brilliant. Lovely to speak to you, Emma. Take care of yourself.
Yeah, you too. Speak to you soon.
Bye.